Okay, now we're going to look at this black people trying to debunk the Egyptian DNA that's come out, and it's kind of funny to watch. But and of course they put this word so-called in there, the so-called ancient. There's no T there. Egyptian with ENG both being high, but who cares? DNA test Afrocentric response part 2, and this is by Chester 55. Okay, he's had 1,200 views. He's got 12 downs and 14 ups, so he's got as many downs as ups pretty much. And there's a reason why. It's because he has a lack of cognition skills, and they tried desperately to keep putting themselves into ancient Egypt whenever they weren't a part of it. And whenever I say weren't a part of it, I mean West African primitives from the slave trade didn't even know it existed, and yet they sit and yap this crap like there was some black people somewhere that did something. And it's kind of disgusting. Imagine that if they did, it would still mean that West Africans were just as primitive as they ever were. But blacks weren't a part of Egypt. They clearly note in here about Nubians. They know Nubians, but they know the others aren't Negroid. You can hear them say this a couple of times. Just looking here, they started the video off with 6 seconds into it, but there was no intro at all. In fact, it starts with one guy yelling into the microphone and it getting screwed up. But estimating phenotypes of the Egyptians. Finally, we analyzed several functional relevant S&Ps in the sample they had, which had low contamination, relatively high coverage. This individual had a derived allele, SLC24A5 locus, which contributes to lighter skin pigmentation and was shown to be at high frequency in northern Anatolia. So whenever they talk about all these S&Ps and they break it down to a T and they tell you, no, all this is genetic going from Caucasians that are up here, and then some of these things are well known S&Ps that they already had already, and it's kind of weird that it showed up in there, but not so weird. The weird thing about this test was that they were going to try to see the ancient Egyptians and the influx of the Hyksos, then the influx of the Persians, Greeks, and Romans, and watch how it changed, and then off of knowing some genetic data off the ancient Romans and Greeks and so on, would be able to see how things laid out, and also how it lays in the DNA. They can kind of tell what came before what, and so they'd be able to see changes in there. And after studying a few of them, they thought they would see slight variations. You'd be like, aha, this one got with a Roman, and so on. The amazing thing was they show very little change at all, and the Negroid admix comes in extremely late, like with the Arab slave trade of the people that are actually there today. And so let's look into this.
What the Delta is near the Mediterranean Sea, right? And they talk about the down south population, and they just play games with words. And so you got to have a working understanding of the information. You got
to have to be able to play with words like a black person, because that's all they do is try to play with words. They try to take somebody's real science, and then they want to play with words and deviate and lie to each other. Let's continue.
I have a working understanding of Egypt itself, or you can get fooled. And so
here we have a black man trying to think that he knows more about genetics and more about history than actually historians, archaeologists, and geneticist people. Let's continue.
When reading these journals and reading these analysis, man, you have to have working knowledge. The pseudo will take this and run with it. The racist, white supremacist, uneducated scientists will run with it.
Oh, the uneducated scientist, but you is so smart. Boy, you sound so damn smart.
I'm telling you right now. So at the end of the day, man, it's important to have reading comprehension and the understanding of a subject matter.
Let me just interject this real quick.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, the location that they're talking about, this single location is known as Abu Sir el Malik.
Yeah.
And if you look into that location, historically, that's where the Hyksos set up shop.
No, that's not where the Hyksos set up shop. They set up shop more down in the Delta, and the site that they went and did all this in predates the Hyksos, through the Hyksos, and on all the way, that they had buried in there multiple times. It's the reason they wanted to use it, because it wasn't just from one point, but it was from before, during, and after. Clearly noted.
The Hyksos, or the Hyksos, what became known as the Hyksos today.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's Hyksos graves that's been, found all around there, and that's like the further south that they went. You know, you
Actually, it's the furthest south that they did go, and there's very few Hyksos graves there whatsoever. The Hyksos graves are more down in the Delta at a few other locations that are well noted.
got the Delta, and then further down, this
Yep.
is where this place is, Abu Sir El Malik, which is close to the Fayum
Yep.
area.
Way up there.
And people know, you know,
Or
the
way
lake
down
over
there.
there going towards our east. I mean,
South,
our west.
but upper.
So it's
Upper Egypt is actually south. It's strange, but it's higher ground, of course, and so Upper Egypt would be what you're looking at on a map is south. But yeah, down there or up there, south, whichever way. It's much farther that way. It's way up close to the Nubian border, somewhat. Although, not all the way to the point that they had it at one time in the ancient burial grounds up there. Let's continue.
known to be a location where foreigners lived, thrived, and was born and died and buried.
So what they're trying to say is, oh, these must all be foreigners. It has to be Negroes. Again, they're pulling that whenever it's clearly noted by archaeologists and scientists. So many times this has been debunked in the ground, but West African Americans really like to become racist, hateful liars and deny their own past of being West Africans, try to talk about East Africans and other cultures that they didn't even know existed. Like the Bible. Let's continue.
It's a cemetery for foreigners. So
No, it's a cemetery for locals. How sad of you to lie so blatantly. It's a cemetery for locals. That is what mummies are.
just on the surface, without even digging too far deep, it's a known location that is a cemetery for foreigners. So yes, if you're using mummies from this location, then the genetics is going to be closely related to the Near East.
And if you're going to use black people with this mentality and this IQ, well, duh, you're never going to get anything out of it. But you can take the smartest ones and you ain't going to get anything out of it. The Caucasians have tried real hard to see if there's any Negroid DNA. It's not like they're giggling that they're not. They don't give a damn. They want to know the truth. You don't want to know the truth. You want somebody to lie and say that some black people did something somewhere that aren't even unrelated to you. And that's disgusting. Let's continue.
And the Mediterranean, or whatever the case is.
Yep.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, so to me, I just find that real funny.
And keep in mind that they're saying that, remember, because they're using this language, that this group is basically representative of all the real Egyptians.
Right.
Right? And so the
normal population. This isn't queens and kings and stuff, which might hold an ability line because of the way they bred with each other and so on. This is your common people. Another interesting fact about this graveyard and other graveyards, necropolises, they're separated in hair color. Blondes in one area, redheads in another, dark hairs in another. What? Yeah, there's blonde and red-haired Egyptians. The earliest statues show blue eyes and stuff into them. It's amazing, but they try to deny all of this, and they're like, oh, somebody made that up. And you're like, really? Somebody made that up? Out of the two people here, let's just look at this from a distance. Who's trying to make something up? Right. It's really gotten disgusting, and it won't quit. Black people keep this hopping around crap where they won't admit their own ancestry and try any, and I do stress the word any, other culture other than their own.
real Egyptians clustered more closely to the Near East and Western Europe, the Western Europe.
Yep.
Right?
Real Egyptians, he just said it. Now, real Egyptians cluster more into the Levant, Middle East, and Anatolia, and Western Europeans than they do to the actual population living there today. Well, they have about a 1% match. Yeah. Other people that match that same haplogroup that they're tagging in here are people like the Tsar Nicholas of Russia and so on. Yeah, isn't that odd? It stretches all the way up through there, but man, them Proto-Indo-Europeans got around way back right after the last ice age. There's other people that didn't really get around much, and they're really mad about it now to the point that they want to lie about everything. Let's continue.
And so, but however, the modern ancient, the modern Egyptians, you know, cluster closer to the Africans and there's no continuity between the ancient real Egyptians and the modern ones. But when we, of course, because the genotype and phenotype are two different things.
So he's going to try to throw that in there. Genotype, phenotype, different things. Yeah, but they do go in concert with each other somewhat. You see the Beja and you see current Ethiopians, and they have about a 40% admix in Ethiopia up there of Caucasian influx, and they really look a lot like, I don't know, Beyonce and stuff, but she's got a lot of admix. Blacks that have a lot of admix just can't cognate, it seems, and they go, well, they must have been back then. Now they start saying they were admixed. Next thing you know, it's just a stark reality when genetics shows you in your face that no, they had so little sub-Saharan African components matching, it's almost non-existent. And by non-existent, we mean not Egyptian.
However, when you look at the modern Egyptians in which they're making this sample from, we know for a fact that these aren't the ancient Egyptians, but they're trying to call them the more closer to Africans.
Right. Here's what he's fixing to say right here now is that the new ones are showing up to be Arabic, Yemen, and all this stuff. I just did a DNA thing on Coptic girl. I guess I'll release that right before this because they'll go together because you can see their cognition of the moment here. But she realized that she was North African and Middle Eastern a lot rather than Egyptian itself. It even says it plainly out. But the oddity in that genetic test that I'm talking about actually said that a lot of Middle Eastern sites like Yemen and places like that were corrugated under African, North African, which are Caucasian, North African DNA. But at the same time, it's saying that Yemen is under that and a bunch of others too, which was the oddity to me. But what it does show is the locals don't have as much a connection, and he's going to mention that.
The stereotype sub-Saharan Africans. Mm-hmm. So it's just a weird play that they have here. It's
a weird play blacks have to left to what they're going to try to play their cards with what's left because they don't have a card. They never had a card on the table, but they act like they're playing a card game and they might win. There is no West African primitives that even were a part of Egypt. The only Negroids in the area were Nubians. West Africans aren't related to Nubians, i.e., it doesn't even matter in their case whatsoever. But the Egyptians were, of course, Caucasians.
That these Arabs, basically, and these mixed with Persian, Greek, and Romans.
Yeah, the current guys living there.
There now.
Yeah.
Are allegedly more closer to Nubians than the real ancient Egyptians who are more closer to the Near East. And
yep, what it shows is that the Arabic or the Islamic slave trade that had that in there, which has a lot of their genetics, they have a lot of admix of Negroids into them because of that, and they show up that. The ancient Egyptians show up a whole lot less, almost non-existent, to the point it's like one of those things on a genetic test, it's like, trash noise in the background. Yeah. Let's continue.
And in terms of Anatolia, basically, because Anatolia, you got to remember there's two hypotheses for the birthplaces of Indo-European speakers. One is Anatolia, and the other is where the Black Sea is.
Yeah, it's up around the Black Sea in Anatolia, and if you look, that connects. That's the starting of what we call the spice trades and then the Silk Road, which dates back to a long time before Alexander the Great, as I've shown in a lot of my videos too. And these are ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans that attach into all these major cultures that brought forth humanity and the religion, which is actually somewhat common. And that's how you can see the variation on a theme between somebody like Sumeria and people that are living around the Levant and so on. And there was a remixing in of Caucasians with ancient Caucasians back again that is shown in primordial time. And of course, sub-Saharan Negroes didn't know the rest of the world existed. And now we have this mental problem here where they're trying to interject themselves into any civilization they can other than their own, disgustingly.
And so we can hypothesize that the writers of this article believe in the Anatolia origin of the Proto-Indo-European speakers.
No, the Proto-Europeans that made up the ancient Egyptians actually came via way of Sumer. showing in through the followers of Shimsu Hor, and by doing so, show that they're from that side. Although they're preemptive to that, there was other contact from the Anatolians coming up and in and out, and perhaps that's literally what makes up half of what Egypt is, and then the Sumerians coming in after that point there. But what it doesn't involve is Nubians. Nubians showed up in the first dynasties. It clearly states they were pretty much all killed off. This is known as Nubian A, and they look somewhat as a proto-Negroid in the skulls and things that they found of those. And it was almost 500 years before any Negroid showed up again, which is seen as Nubian C. Nubians were not allowed into Egypt by decrees, such as the Simna Stele of Senusret III and many, many more. They weren't allowed into Egypt. When you see them on the walls doing it, it's just that they gave obeisance, perhaps up at Heh, like it says, but they weren't coming in and talking to the actual king himself or anything along that line. It says so clearly to itself. They were disgusting and vile, primitive troglodytes, they called them, and they didn't like the Negroids that were living there. But don't cry, West Africans, you aren't related in any way, shape, or form to even those.
And if that is the case, what you're saying is that the Proto-Indo-European speakers, of course, are responsible for ancient Egyptian, and of course, the European race and continent and things of this nature, and just civilization in general.
And he finally cognated it. There you go. So where are all these people? Yep, that's where it all came from, in all North Africa, all the way around. There wasn't some boundary all of a sudden there at the Nile, and black people right on the other side. All of North Africa is always Caucasians. The Green Sahara Project, deep in the Sahara, back whenever it was wet, way back when, what does that show? That shows Caucasians too. What does the Hofmeyr site down in the Cape show? It shows Caucasians down there. Blombos Rock, Caucasians all the way through there. So Caucasians actually had a lot more of it. Well, yeah, if you look at the definition of Caucasian race, it'll say that they're all around North Africa, up through Egypt and through the Horn of Africa, but also all the way from Europe through Russia to China, all the way down to India, all the way across. These are all Caucasians. They heralded mankind, humanity, and the religion of the Bible. Black people aren't in a part of that either, and that's another problem that they have. Let's continue.
And see, like I said, this article is kind of putting a little fuel, put a little steroids in the tank of the 1970s with that push of separating Egypt from Africa, from Black Africa.
It never was a part of Black Africa, but it's that 70s push. It's that, no. In 70s there was a Negroid push to try to put blacks into a civilization they had nothing to do with, and Diop and Sertima and crap like that. That was debunked in a short period of time. Blacks still hop around like, we did something. No, you had somebody come say a bunch of crap that got debunked. Let's continue.
Okay, so we're going to have to get Sheikh G up and Theophilo Bingo on them again. I mean,
actually, we need to step it up. They did what they had to do in their day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And now it's time for a
version 10.0.
Exactly, because they were operating in 1974 knowledge.
Right.
So, we, based on the, of course, standing on the shoulders of Diop and Obinga, but we have far more information than they do.
And yeah, the information that we have now is that he had nothing to do with it. And the sad thing is that West Africans never knew it existed, have no genetic continuity connection to it. They were a primitive pre-Stone Age illiterate people when first found, and we're not going to try to change history. Blacks are going to try to lie about it repeatedly over and over again in the face of over and over repeated showings that they had nothing to do with it. It's quite disgusting. Look how they embrace this Egyptian ideology and all this stuff instead of their own heritage. It's disgusting.
Yep. Version 10.0 now. So we
they're 10.0.
10.0.
They're 10.0 now.
This is why, people think that we're,
0.0
in ancient Egypt just for the sake of it. And it's like, no, you have to...
He didn't even finish the sentence. They think that we're involved with Egypt just for the sake of... And then he's trying to think of why the hell they would even do it. because they're not related in any way, so it's just foolish. But we're trying to make it to where you don't think of us as the primitives we were.
Defend Egypt, because defending Egypt is defending the whole continent of Africa.
No.
In African civilization, in terms of West Africa. Because the same concepts and ideas that you find in ancient Egypt, you find in West Africa.
No, you don't. There's no cultural, genetic connection whatsoever. Not one. Any that has been tried to be shown has been easily debunked. The connection is Proto-Indo-Europeans. The language is Afro-Asiatic, heavy on the Asiatic, slight on the Afro-Caucasian North African endemics. The Negroids in the area spoke Nilotic, a different language that the Egyptians themselves called gibberish. Thoth himself said it was harder to train them than it was to train baboons. And it's written in stone for all time. Negroids were not a part of Egypt. If a Negroid was in Egypt, that would be a non-Egyptian Negroid in Egypt. If he lived there for 6 generations, you'd be like, this is a 6th generation non-Egyptian Negroid. Blacks that are telling this are African Americans. That's because they're not the Americans that founded America. They're previous African slaves and illiterate, primitive people who captured and sold their own kind like a drive-through slave mart. And we're not going to start lying about that end of it either. Let's see if we can finish with any dignity. I'm not going to go through this whole thing.
You find it in Central Africa. You find it in East Africa. You find it in South Africa. Same words, same rituals.
No.
And so now, what is a Pan-African substratum across the continent is now, you just give that away and say that, because this is what's going to happen.
Blacks don't give nothing away. Nobody's taking anything away from them. None of this had anything to do with you in any way, shape, or form. It's disgusting that you yammer. Let's continue.
And I know I'm jumping thoughts here.
Yeah, you are.
If the Indo-Europeans are the origins of the ancient Egyptian civilization,
Doing.
Right, according to
Bingo.
Basically this study and all others like it.
Yes.
And
this study and all others like it, and a culmination of thousands of people's data. Yes. Continue.
Find commonalities between West Africans and ancient Egypt or Central Africa.
You don't. There are no commonalities between far West African primitives and ancient Egypt. It's disgusting if somebody tries to say, well, we lay down when we sleep. I mean, come on.
In ancient Egypt. What they're going to argue is that it is a case of diffusion. And here we go again with the Hamitic hypothesis.
Yep, that's what I said. Exactly.
Hamites, Hamitic pathology. Well, that comes from the Bible. The Hamites, if you'll read the definition on it, are North African and Egyptian Caucasians, as opposed to the Shemites of the other area out in the Middle East and Levant, and the Japhethites of up north. These people that came out of a boat that landed in the Caucasus Mountains, for Christ's sake, started the religion that we know of today as the Bible. It's all about Caucasians. It does not talk about Eskimos. It does not talk about Chinese and other Asians, Far East. It does not talk about the people of southern India. It does not speak of Negroids. It's not a Negroid book. It has nothing to do with it. That God of the Bible chose Caucasian people. Adam means pale and blushing. Noah was said to have been stark white and beautiful, and his eyes lit up the room, and all of the things that are about him. It's disgusting. They try to say, well, Jacob and Esau were twins, and God loved Jacob, so Esau's white people. No, God apparently didn't love black people because he didn't even mention them. They are not mentioned. Neither are Amerindians. Neither are Eskimos. Try to comprehend this.
So whatever you are linking to in terms of civilization in West Africa is not really because of your indigenous African ingenuity.
No.
It is more so a result of these Indo-Europeans who, quote unquote, back migrated into Africa and spread their language and civilization.
Yes.
And that's why you have with them, in their eyes, that little bit of what you got in West Africa.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of genetics showing up too across North Africa, and the depth of that, where Negroids live now, where they never used to live before, that have come in, and they've got slight immense amounts of admix. There's even this guy Clyde Winters. He tries to say the blacks were Greeks, the blacks were the Vikings, the blacks were anybody, but he did show an article here lately that strangely shows that all Negroids have a little touch of Neanderthal DNA, apparently from a Caucasian interaction a long time ago. And it may be part of what their ghost species is, but they also have another hominid, not a humanoid variation, but a hominid back predating probably Homo erectus itself, leading to a different variation that they have there. You look at Homo erectus and there's quite a variation on what they show you they look like and in different areas, and that's where you start to see a variation and change that pretty much doesn't recoagulate as one again, and variations from there, but the variations that happen started from a long time ago. So you can say we have a common ancestor, but there are also a lot of things uncommon, and the tree grew much differently than each other. One of those, it was not a part of anything that happened in Egypt, North Africa, or any of the Caucasian societies we talk about, much less the Bible, but they desperately want to put themselves anywhere but West Africans.
In Central Africa. This is why this stuff is important. Because, the data, especially coming from the African school, is showing that the reason why you're finding all of these similarities is because they come from a common origin in Central East Africa. And they spread out with this energy and the same culture and language. This is why
Yeah, and the out of Africa was Caucasians. Negroids never really made it out of Africa. There's a population that stayed primitive and down-trapped in a certain area of the West African Congoids. They're not really related to the Khoisan. They sure as hell aren't related to the Nubians. They aren't related to the people that are the Ethiopians. And they're not related to the people of the Bible. And they're not related to the Egyptians. They're not related to the Eskimos. They're not related to the Nordics and Scandinavians. They're not related to the Anatolians. They're not related to the ancient Europeans, Proto-Indo-Europeans, people from India, any islands whatsoever, Australians, nor Chinese and Asiatics. They're black people. They're primitive people from sub-Saharan Africa down over in the West Congo area, and aren't going to ever be called anything but that. And the worse they rant, it makes their own people look desperate and worse. Let's continue.
You can link, for example, the Yoruba and the Ghanaians and people in the Bakongo with the ancient Egyptians on very serious and real points.
No, you can't in any way, shape, or form. They have tried desperately, but on real and serious points, West Africans have no connections whatsoever to the ancient Egyptians, to the Nubians, to the North Africans, to Eskimos, to people from India. Let me say it again, not related. Genetics shows you can take a DNA 23andMe test and they'll tell you what your mix is of ancient Negroids, and they'll show you some Caucasian admix you have, which people seem to blame on slave masters and so on. But no, it seems to be fairly uniform. Whenever they couldn't get those primitives to do real well, they hybrided, mulattoed, and backbred a few of them and got that going on. And if you look into the history of it, it caused a real problem because the blacks that were selling their own people here in Africa started getting mad about it because the Jewish slave masters weren't taking so many away to South America, where 92% of the slaves came to in the Americas. All of that can be looked into quite deep, but we're not going to do that today. We're just looking at people who can't cognate whenever they're looking at a DNA test, and they're trying to make up anything they can to try to weasel somehow a West African influence into East African Egyptian Caucasians. And it definitely goes the other way.
Because they come from that common ancestor in Africa. And so when
Africa does not mean Negroids. Whites are not Negroids. Caucasians are not Negroids. It is easy seen. Let's continue.
You give up Egypt, you give up West Africa. And this is a slick way in which they do it.
You give up Africa.
No,
And
you ain't giving up anything, and nothing's being taken away from you at all. Just history is being shown to be exactly this. Genetics are proving it to be exactly that, and black people can't handle it. Nobody's giving up Africa. All of North Africa, through Central Africa and East Africa, through the Horn, was always Caucasians. If you look the definition of Caucasian race, it'll tell you so. So it's not like they're giving up anything. It's not like they had it to give up, like, oh, well, here you go. In fact, the area that's been taken over by Negroids now is a here you go, and now they sustain on aid from Caucasians from around the world. You don't see Caucasian videos with bloated kids that are ignorant sitting around snotty noses begging for food and for a few dollars more. We see it happening the other way, but everybody wants to pretend that doesn't exist. Do blacks ever send a dime or help or go back and help their own people? No. They sit in America and want to play this pity party victim BS and see if they can ride this. And they try to steal money off of other low IQ Negroids by getting them to believe racist, false beliefs too, which makes them cause their own racism by their own hand and their own jealous lies, like being in the Bible or being Egyptians or anything they try to tout that's not a West African primitive. Let's see if they can end with dignity as we close this.
and you know, you give up Egypt, you give up Africa, and that's the same statement that, you know, I know you've touched on before, that the fall of Egypt set the stage for what came after, the whole cascade of things that came after, leading up into and including the continental slave trade. So
No, but yes, there's some insight right there, I guess, if you will. Once the Caucasian Egyptians left Egypt and it got taken over by an Arabic people, and Islamics came in, and the Moors, who were definitely interested in slavery and Barbary slave trade for a long, long time, for they started this 900 years before even the Jewish slave masters got involved and the Americas were even found. And what we find is that, yeah, after Egypt fell, it kind of fell in the 25th dynasty. Egypt fell to people from the south, Cushites, and they had Negroids with them helping, the Nubians, and they took over for a mere 70 years. They set fire and literally burnt the man alive that was down in Sais that was running the place. It's a disgusting story if you look into it. But the Akkadians, who had just had their ass whooped by the Egyptians in a generation, turned around and 70 years later came back and easily took over Egypt. And they were able to separate the people that weren't Egyptians simply just on sight. And wonder how that works. And they got them pushed all the way back up out of there again. He stole their kids and castrated them and made them polished gold in Acadia, it says in some texts. And it really never rose again from there. Sure, it rode that wave that it had been riding, but it is known as the illegal dynasty, and it's our illegitimate dynasty. And what's really found out about that is the start of the fall of Egypt whenever you look into it, because from then on they were always a subject to a foreign power, whether it be under Persians, Akkadians, whether it be under the Greeks or Romans later than that. And so that was really the fall of Egypt. And because of all of that going down, and then the Roman conquest, Alexander the Great falling apart, and then allowing the Bedouin Arabic people into that area, influxing in from far to the east that they were staying in, that allowed the whole area to change to what it is now. That infiltrating North Africa allowed for the Islamic slave trade, which again began 900 years before the Americas were even found. So yes, it's possible that the blacks invading Egypt in the 25th dynasty caused their own slavery of their own people. But of course, we're talking about totally unrelated blacks whatsoever. Just one over here making a mistake and then others over there paying for it. Not like something like that may have gone down in one way, shape, or form or another, regardless of anything up through history at some other point. If you can imagine if they were untouched to this point, how primitive they would still be when we ran into them. And then would you have them trying to say, oh, that was mine? You probably would still. Something tells me in my mind it wouldn't take but a couple of generations before they start grasping out and telling you that they weren't West Africans, that they were actually something else entirely. But yeah, I think that's just going to about do it there. Yeah, gave away Egypt. No, you didn't give anything away. Nobody stole anything from you either. It's just the fact of reality, and you really can't handle reality there. Whoever, what is this guy? Chester 55. Yeah. Like, share, and subscribe, guys, and enjoy. But yeah, whatever they can do. This is kind of like, I don't know, in the news today where they talk about how the Mueller report came out and there's no collusion, and then on the news the people that hate Trump are saying, well, this means collusion. And it's like, are y'all seriously going to keep going? It's been 2 years and $35 million. You've tried to impeach our president in front of the world and made us look like idiots, and you've made yourself look like idiots, and you're really losing the vote, Democrats. It's going to 2020. I mean, I don't know what you're going to try to pull out of your pocket or try to ruin Trump with more, but it's getting disgusting that all you do is attack Trump instead of try to help the nation. You're not doing anything that's helping the nation. In fact, it's decaying. In fact, because you're trying to go so against Trump, you're willing to accept left field ideas that you wouldn't have accepted just years ago, and everybody sees it plainly, and it's gotten disgusting. But I guess that's another thing, and I don't want to get into politics really on this. Like, share, and subscribe, guys. Peace.